If we've never met before, my name is Michelle Knight. I am a personal branding consultant and a marketing strategist, and I founded the company Brandmerry back in 2016. So just a little bit about me and my story, because that's what this entire training is about. I started my business in 2016, right after the birth of my son. He was just 1 month old when I decided I didn't want to go back to work, and I set off on this entrepreneurial journey with no idea what I was doing. I spent the next 8 months trying to learn everything I could around business from our friends over at Google, the good Google search bar. I was working a 9 to 5 and I was like figuring out how to raise a human being. And through all of that, I was showing up, I was creating content, I was doing all of the things. And about 8 months in, I realized I didn't have a lot to show for it. I had been doing live videos, creating content, all of that stuff, but I hadn't made any money in my business. So a couple weeks before I was set to leave my 9 to 5, I scrapped everything. I built everything again from the ground up, focusing specifically on what made me me and how I could connect more deeply with my audience on a very personal level. I started to share more story, and in just a couple weeks, I signed my very first client, somebody who had been in my community for a while but was just waiting for the right message. And I continued to grow my business to a 6-figure business in 1 year. And I relied heavily on HoneyBook at that time, which is I'm an advocate for it, and I'm a user of HoneyBook, because that first year in business, I focused on one-on-one clients. So that's what I really worked with. And HoneyBook was the way for me to streamline the back end of my business. And so that first year, it was me and HoneyBook hanging out, building my business. And I've continued to scale my business over the last 4 years, helping thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs and creating over $500,000 in cash revenue in my business. And I really credit all of it to the power of storytelling, not only sharing my story, but also understanding my audience's story as well. So that's a little bit about me. And today we're going to talk specifically about why storytelling matters in your business and on social media. We're also going to talk a little bit more about the fears of storytelling, what makes stories so powerful, and I'm going to give you my 6-part framework for sharing stories on social media. All right. So I want to kick it off by talking about why storytelling is so important. I need you to be like so obsessed with it when you jump into it, because it's so powerful and it's so fun. So nerd out with me for a couple minutes and let's talk numbers. All right. So the first thing is that we are all posting and creating content on social media. So is everybody else, right? Everybody is putting content on social media. We always are fighting with the algorithm, what have you. And so when we're taking the time and energy to create our content, I don't know about you, but not only do I want it to stand out, I want it to become memorable. That's how we get those lifers, right? Those people who check our feed to see if we've posted recently, check your Insta stories to see what you're up to. These are people who are really in love with your brand and your business and seek out your content. And so storytelling, it's a great way to do that, because stories are 22 times more likely to be remembered by your audience. The reason for this is because when we read stories, when we hear stories, we release dopamine in the brain because of this feel-good emotional connection. And as a result of that, our content, the things that we're sharing, are more likely to be remembered. So think about if you're sharing something in your business about a statistic, or that, the cart is open for something. That's all fine and dandy. But imagine if you could tie that in with some sort of story to make sure that your audience not only pulls into that story, but also remembers the fact that you're selling something, because we're all business owners here. So not only will it pull your audience in, but it also makes your content 22 times more likely to be remembered. In addition to that, Harvard did a study that found that 95% of purchase decisions are made subconsciously. So they're really rooted in an emotional connection. This is why we talk about trust so much as a business owner, and not as much focus on logistics as we all, are typically led to believe when we're creating, sales emails or social media posts or different things like that. We tend to really be focused on the logistics. This is what's included. This is how much it is. But what we really should be focused on is making an emotional connection. Now, I want to share an experiment with you that I think is like the coolest thing that I've ever found on the internet. It's called the eBay experiment. And back in 2009, Rob Walker and Joshua Glenn did an experiment. All right. They asked 100 creative writers to invent stories about $129 worth of items. So they bought a bunch of random stuff, one of which was a paperweight, and they asked them to invent these stories about these items. They listed them, they sold them on eBay. The results were that the products themselves had a net profit of $3.6 million and a 2,700% increase in the final markup. That paperweight that they bought for $1.47 sold for $197. The product didn't change. What changed was the messaging and the story connected to the product. This experiment really proves that we as human beings, right? Because we're business owners, we're brands, but we're also consumers, that we're drawn in and connect more to story, and that we make purchase decisions based on those connections. So when it comes to showing up on social media, storytelling will not only help you stand out, but it's also going to help your content last and increase your sales. Social media is kind of the entry level point. It's where people might find you. It's where they're going to build that know, like, and trust factor. And then it's about taking that story and carrying it on into a platform like HoneyBook, where you can continue to nurture that relationship. So with that, we're all hooked on story. I'm going to pass it over to Mac, who's going to talk a little bit more about how to continue that conversation.
Amazing. Okay. I love that experiment, Michelle. So full disclosure, you guys, there's some stuff that we didn't obviously rehearse through. So I'm learning with you, and I am obsessed with that. So cool. I love the sales aspect of it. Okay. So I'm going to be showing you guys, obviously we're talking about hooking people on social media, continuing to tell that story. And where does HoneyBook kind of start to tie in? We're talking about getting those clients hooked and then continuing to kind of work with them. And where does HoneyBook come into this equation, right? So the easiest way to get HoneyBook involved in this equation is through the HoneyBook contact form. So that's what I'm going to be showing you guys. So we're going to start over here in the contact form. And let me get this question mark to go away. So obviously we're all familiar with the contact form that can exist on your website, right? And your website is also a great place to tell your story. But specifically when we're talking about social media and getting some kind of organic people coming through your funnel from that location, how do we get those people hooked? So contact form, obviously we can have this embedded onto your website. And this is fabulous because anybody who fills out this form and hits submit is going to be added to your HoneyBook pipeline and added to essentially what's your sales funnel, right? So HoneyBook is really heavily focused on helping you with your sales funnel and your sales process, from the time you get an inquiry all the way through booking. So that's what HoneyBook's key focus is. So how do you get those people in? The contact form is your first step for getting those people into the system as automatically as possible. So definitely, if you are a HoneyBook user and you're not using the contact form, definitely spend some time hanging out here. One great thing with the contact form in HoneyBook is you can actually add content blocks as well. So I think a lot of people use the HoneyBook contact form just to add questions and collect, like a standard intake form, right? You're getting name, email, basic information. But this can be really fabulous to actually add some content blocks where you can continue to kind of tell your story. Maybe you want to have a little block in here where you continue to, talk about who you are as a business owner, what you do, what makes you special, and continue to really relate to those people through a content block or something like that. So beyond having this on your website, like I've been talking about, another great option, especially for social media, is using the direct link option. So once this gets loaded here for me, essentially what this is going to be is this is a standalone contact form, which I think because I just made that edit, it's not going to let me do. So let me publish my changes. This is a great lesson for you guys too, while you're watching. If any of this happens to you guys, you can easily just click the publish changes and it'll update. And now it'll load hopefully for me. There we go. So this is a standalone contact form, so you guys can easily have this on your social media. You can have this be your contact me button on your Facebook page. You can have this be your link in bio on your Instagram. I even encourage people to just have this saved as a note on their phone if you get people texting you from inquiries. This is an amazing resource. It's basically, you can think about it as a catch-all resource for getting your leads off of social media and into a more personalized connection where you're getting to learn a little bit more about their story, which we're actually going to go into in a little bit here too. So contact form on your website, contact form on social media. Contact form is really the missing link for connecting social inquiries into your HoneyBook system. So hopefully you guys have had a good chance to explore that already. If not, definitely take some time to do it in your HoneyBook account today. And I am going to throw it on back over to Michelle.
Let me unmute myself. That would be helpful. And the contact form is one of my favorite features because, like you were saying, it's a great way, and what we're going to talk about, knowing your ideal customer. It's a great way to get the information that you want about your ideal customer so that you can go into a sales conversation having that information, because storytelling plays a role everywhere. So I love it. So good. All right, let me share my screen again. All right, beautiful. Okay, so let's talk, actually great segue. Let's talk a little bit about the secret sauce to storytelling on social media. It's very difficult to say, okay? So this is the secret sauce. This is what you don't want to miss. So when we think about stories, typically we think about long, drawn out stories, you know, books that we read, memoirs, all of that kind of stuff. But when you're dealing with social media, there's a character limit, right? We have so much space that we can actually share story. So this is where micro stories come into play. And this is what I really want you to focus on when you're sharing stories and content on social media. So micro stories, as I like to call, are everyday stories that you can share that engage your audience and relate to your audience specifically where they are in their journey. So they're not these long, drawn out, you know, over the course of 3-week type of stories. They're very specific moments in time, very specific language. And what this does is it allows you to really connect with your audience. So your audience at the end of the day wants to know that you get them. It doesn't matter what you sell. If you sell a skincare line, or you're a photographer, or you're a coach, or you sell a digital product, people are making decisions from an emotional connection. So they want to know, do you understand who they are? So much of what really storytelling comes from is understanding who your audience is so that you can create stories for them. Now, these stories that you're creating can touch on a ton of different things, but just to give you an idea, you can talk about what your audience is currently struggling with, right? The pain that they are experiencing, the things that they want, the desires that they have, the beliefs that they have, the values that they hold, obstacles standing in their way. Those are just some examples of things that you can gather through your ideal customer and client research to then use in storytelling to kind of amplify those pieces. And don't worry, I've got examples for days coming at you, okay? And these stories that you share can be your own, right? They can also be hypothetical. So back to the paperweight that we talked about before, we're not making up false stories, but you can create hypothetical scenarios. So let's say that you are a photographer, you're a wedding photographer, and you want to paint a picture of the wedding day of your bride's dreams, right? You can use a story or a pickup line like, imagine if, and then paint a picture of what that wedding day could be like and how they should hire you as a photographer to make that happen. They can also be client stories or testimonials that you share. The key here is making sure that you understand your audience. That will help you choose the stories to share. We often think that sharing stories are really about us, but they're not really about us. They're about our audience, because at the end of the day, we're running businesses. We want to make money from our businesses. We're not just sharing content to share content. Everything needs to be very purposeful, even storytelling. So the crucial piece of this puzzle is, with the stories that you're sharing, you want to identify the value that it provides your audience and be super clear and specific on that. So I've got 2 things that I want you to write down to remember when it comes to creating stories on social media. Number 1 is, every time you're thinking of a story, I want you to identify what value it provides your audience. Not everybody, not so-and-so's audience, not Stacy's audience, your audience. Knowing your audience, what they want, their desires, their pain, their pleasure, all of those different things we talked about. What value does that provide your audience? And one of the cool tools that I love to use in my business that I've shared with my clients as well, super easy, is create a side-by-side chart. So 2 columns. On one column, you start to write down stories, right? The more that you get into this practice, the more you'll be like walking through the grocery store and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I've got a great story that I can share on Instagram, right? It becomes much easier as you start to seek out stories around you. So you can start to add stories at any time to the left side of this column. We call this a story bank. Then when you're getting ready to, go schedule your social media content for the week, you go on the right side and you specifically write out the value it provides your audience. If you can't identify the value, it's not time to share that story. You can always circle back to it, come back to it later. That's the beauty of stories. We sit around campfires and we still tell stories about when we were 10 years old, right? There's no time limit on a story. You can come back to it once you learn a little bit more about your ideal customer, or in a more creative headspace and can actually think about a more specific value, then you can share it. It's in your story bank. But in order to share a story, you want to make sure that it is valuable to your audience, all right? That they get something from it. So that's the secret sauce. I always say when it comes to storytelling, it's not about you, it's about your audience. Now, some of you might be new to storytelling. And I know that when we start talking about storytelling, there's a lot of fears that come up, right? It's like, how much is too much? How often should I share a story? What if I share too much? What if my story is not good enough, right? I've done this long enough to know that those are kind of the top fears that come up. So let's take a moment before we get into, frameworks and story ideas and all of that to talk about these fears. So some of the most common ones, as I've mentioned, are, not feeling good enough to share a story, not comfortable sharing a story, not sure how much story to share, confused on where to start. And I want to take an opportunity to hopefully squash or begin to squash some of those fears that might be coming up for you. Number one is when you come from a place that I just shared before, understanding the value for your audience, it shifts storytelling completely. It's no longer really about you and your stories. It's about what stories can I create that are valuable to my audience, right? It's for your audience specifically. That removes a lot of the emotion of, is this story good enough, right? Is this story, is this the story that I should be sharing? If you follow the value grid that I shared with you, you already have that information. But I also know that sometimes you're thinking, oh, what if I share too much, right? What if I share this story too many times? Well, the reality is, from a marketing standpoint, because I'm a big fan of data, if you haven't already caught on to the statistics in the beginning, is your audience needs to hear things multiple times. And they definitely need to hear things multiple times on social media. The odds of your audience seeing things the first time you posted them is very, very slim, which is why it's important that we're consistently sharing content, stories, promotions, all of those different things on social media. And there's kind of the rule of 7 in marketing, right? 7 touch points in marketing before someone typically makes a purchase decision. That could be, seeing an ad, that could be a social media post, watching an IGTV video. It doesn't matter. But this tells us that we need to be sharing and showing up consistently for our audience. So I actually don't believe in, spamming your audience with too much, because the odds of them actually seeing all of it is kind of slim. It's like a win situation on social media with the algorithm. And there's also that fear of not being worthy of sharing a story. And again, I would love for you to remove the emotion out of choosing the stories and really focus on your audience. Who are these stories for? What is the value? Focusing on the value will shift everything when it comes to your mindset of social media. The last thing I'll share on the, squashing the fears is that when sometimes we're worried about oversharing or something doesn't feel good to us. Look, you're the business owner. You're the CEO. You get to decide if a story feels comfortable sharing. If you're a personal brand and you're sharing stories about your journey that are highly relatable to your audience, you get to decide. All right. So if a story feels messy, or if you feel like you're in it, or you can't clearly identify the value, put it aside and circle back to it later. The story that I'm going to share with you as an example at the end is one of those stories for me. All right, so that's a little bit about taking the emotion out of it, sharing stories for your audience. But I want to give you tangible stories to get started sharing. So I've compiled a list of some stories that you can go, like today, I want you to like post stories on Instagram and tag me specifically when you share these stories. So here are some examples of stories that I love to share. And I'm going to break each of these down for you. So if you have pen and paper, now's a really great time to start writing things down. So the first one is sharing stories that showcase your brand emotions. So one of the things that I teach in my signature program is all about emotional branding, really identifying how you want your audience to feel, and then allowing your aesthetics, your copy, your messaging, your photos that you choose to reflect that, making it really an entire experience for your audience rather than just another brand. So once you identify those emotions, you can share stories that showcase those emotions. For example, one of my emotions that I want my audience to feel is courage. I want them to feel courageous when they come in contact with my brand, like they can do anything, create the business and life of their dreams. So I love to share inspiring and motivational stories about doing things that are courageous. Sometimes these are very personal to my business, but sometimes they're not. In fact, one of my most successful stories when I started my business was over my fear of heights. And I shared a story about how I'm slowly making, baby steps on overcoming my fear of heights. And I shared that story. And then I asked my audience to share something that they're overcoming and how they're being courageous. And that is just a great example of showcasing my emotion and making a connection with my audience. Another one is sharing your brand values. So 2021, you can quote me right now, 2021 is going to be the year of brand values, right? We've learned a lot in 2020. And one of the things that we've really connected with is that we want to buy from brands that share values, share the same values as us. So use that momentum heading into the new year to identify your brand values and share them online, specifically on social media. You can also create stories that relate to where your ideal customer is at in their journey. Everyone shares a transformation, right? I don't care what you sell. I'm obsessed with skincare. So I always tell the skincare, story. If you sell a skincare product, your audience is here. They want to use your product so that they can experience this, right? It's always a transformation. So talk about that transformation. Talk about where they are, where they want to be. I already gave that example of the brides and the wedding day. This is a great way to share stories with your audience. I also love to showcase stories that feature products and services. So I get a little pushback from my product businesses. It's totally fine, where they're like, but I have a product. How do I share stories? Share a story of that product. And this goes for digital courses, one-on-one coaching, all of it. Why did you create that? What's the mission behind that? Can you show that process to your audience? Client testimonials is a great way to do this. If you physically make something, show your audience that piece of the puzzle as well. Another example is your brand story. Now, I know you all wrote your brand story. It's probably the first thing that you did. It's what we always think of when we think of storytelling. It's a small piece of the puzzle. But the thing that I always see entrepreneurs do is they map out their brand story, they put it on an About Me page, and then that's it. We don't use it anymore. What if you made it a habit to share that brand story every 30 days on social media? So every new follower that came in contact with your brand and your business knew your brand story, knew your founder story, understood why you are on this journey, why you created your business, and start to build that connection with them. You can also show behind the scenes of your business. My favorite way to do this is on Insta stories. I just did this yesterday. On Monday, I share a whole behind the scenes of all that I'm working on in my business, how I manage my time, my schedule, momming it up, all those different things. And so video and specifically Insta stories, Reels, IGTV, those are great ways to share stories without having to physically create copy. And then finally, another way to share a story is through client testimonials or sharing, a before and after of your audience as well. So you guys have what you need, right? You have a series of stories now that you can get out and share with the world. So now let's talk about what you need to do in order to craft those stories. I already mentioned pen and paper, but now would be a great time to have that, okay? So The biggest thing that I really want you to remember is that storytelling, specifically on social media, does not have to be long and lengthy. We don't want it to be long and lengthy. We want it to get in there. We want it to build connection. We want it to relate and provide value to your audience. And we also want it to follow this 6-part framework. So I got ahead of myself, but here you go. Ready for the 6-part framework? Ta-da, here it is. All right, so this is the social story framework, and I'm going to talk about each of these pieces, and then I'm going to give you 2 examples. So the first piece is you want to grab the attention of your audience. This could be a line, right? We see like the little, emojis of like a champagne flute, and then it's like, oh my gosh, you guys, right, on social media, or a bunch of the confetti emojis. It could also be a photo, which is really what's more common on social media. That's what's stopping your audience in their tracks. So you want to grab their attention. The second thing you want to do is set up the story. The third thing you want to do is introduce some sort of conflict or opportunity. Every great story that has ever been written has some sort of conflict or opportunity. Then you want to share a decision or a turning point. Finally, what happened, the resolve, and then you make it about your audience. So I'm going to give you an example of a social media post. This is a real social media post that I did. The entire social media post follows this framework, all right? So the goal here was to play up my brand emotions. I really want my audience to feel comfortable, like I'm their friend, that I 100% get them. I also know that so many of my audience members are mothers. So this particular story, and is one that I had saved in my story bank until I felt ready to share it, is about the birth of my son. So it started off by grabbing the attention of my audience with a photo of my son and I. All right. So you already know I'm a mama, right? You see that photo on social media, you stop, you read. Then I said, when my son was born, I found myself in an in-between. So this is setting up the story, right? I'm explaining that I'm a mom, and I'm explaining that when my son was born, I was struggling. Between the woman I once was and this new woman that I was being called to become. Have you ever felt torn between 2 identities before? You're not sure if you should hold on or fully step into the next chapter. So I'm introducing the conflict, right? I was at a crossroads. I was feeling torn between 2 people, and I'm bringing it back to my audience. I'm asking them a question. Then I said I had a choice in front of me. I could hold on to what was comfortable, what I knew, or I could step fully into this next chapter. What I knew for certain was that I couldn't stay where I was or how I was currently thinking. So I presented the decision, right? I had a decision in front of me. Do I stay, do I hold on to what's comfortable, or do I move fully, fearfully into the next chapter? Then the resolve. I had a choice while sitting on the couch with my newborn son to start my own business, giving me the time, financial, and location freedom I desired. I knew this new chapter meant I could have it all if I was willing to go for it. So I did, right? I've resolved my story. That's like a couple sentences, and I've shared an entire story. Then I'm making it all about them. I want you to know that if you're feeling called to be more and do more, it is possible for you, that you don't have to stay where you are because it's comfortable. You are worthy of taking the same risks I did that could completely change your life. If you were to leap today, what would you do? Who would you be? Do that, right? I'm inspiring my audience. I'm making it about them. I'm asking questions. I'm asking for engagement. I've taken a story that was about me and I've made it 100% about them. So that's an example of following this framework that I just broke down for you, using an entire social media post. But let's talk about using this framework in one sentence. This is my favorite. So I have the piece right here. So it says, sitting in a giant conference room in sunny California with about 3,000 other entrepreneurs, grasping my notepad and pen, I paused when I heard this stat, right? So I've already grabbed attention. I've already set up the story, and I'm starting to kind of introduce an opportunity. The quote was, when you add storytelling to your messaging and content, it is 22 times more likely to be remembered. So I'm sharing that turning point. And I knew I was onto something. I knew storytelling would continue to shape and change the businesses of so many women. I've resolved it. And then I could go on to teach them about storytelling. I could go on to pitch an offer. I could go on to pitch a webinar. I could pitch a lead magnet, a freebie, anything like that related to storytelling. Do you see how this doesn't have to be this long, drawn out thing? Storytelling can be just a few sentences, maybe even one, as a way to show up, share story, and build connection with your audience. All right, I'm going to pass it back over to Mac, and we're going to talk a little bit more about continuing this process with your audience.
Amazing. I know that everything that you're saying is true, because as you're speaking, even just reading the captions to us, I'm like literally on the edge of my seat, like, what did she do next? What did she think? Like, how is it impacting? Like, I'm so like involved, and I'm not even scrolling through Instagram. So it works, people. Okay, let's hop back over into the HoneyBook demo here. And there are a couple of things that I'm going to show you guys. Specifically, there's just two things I wanted to highlight, which you probably saw as a little teaser on the slide we were just sharing. So when Michelle and I were meeting to talk about what we wanted to go through and where the real value from HoneyBook in terms of brand storytelling can really come together, where the missing links are. The two things that we really wanted to highlight were scheduling and the brochure, and then obviously the contact form, which we already touched on. So I guess it's really three things, but scheduling is a huge benefit. And I know it's something that Michelle uses in her process as well, in terms of making that personal connection with your clients. So once you hook them in, right, and then you're funneling them from your social media into the HoneyBook system, it's time to start making things personal, right? It's time to get somebody on the phone. It's time to get on Zoom with somebody. It's time to meet somebody at a Starbucks when, you know, things open back up again. So it's time to make some of that personal connection, and scheduling is one of the ways where we can really do that, because it allows you to show your schedule to your clients so that they can select a time that works best for them. So very straightforward. If you guys are familiar with any scheduling tool, we're not reinventing the wheel on this feature whatsoever. It's simply just going to show your availability based on your preferences to your clients. So let's say you want to do 15-minute phone calls with your clients. And let's just look at what this looks like from your client's perspective. So you're doing 15-minute phone calls. This is your initial introductory phone call to your clients, where you're getting to know them. And you like to take your calls from, well, this is a different time zone, isn't it? We don't want to take a phone call at 1 a.m. Anyways, you would set it up to be the right time zone for you, and then you set it up on your preferences. So let's say you like to take your calls between, you reserve your morning for all of your normal work, but in the afternoons, you take your calls from noon to 4 p.m., Monday through Friday. And that's the parameter that you set in the scheduler. And then it'll show that availability to your clients so that they can select a time that works best for them. So there's not as much back and forth, right? There's no more, are you available on Thursday at 2? Oh no, I can't do that. What about this? There's all this back and forth. So it eliminates that and just gets straight to the point where your clients can select a time with you. So very simple, straightforward option here with the scheduling tool, but where you can really start to use this and where that can be beneficial. So you set this up first, and then I'm going to head over here to our master template section, and we're going to hang out in brochures for a little bit, because hands down, the brochure file is one of the best storytelling files that you can use in HoneyBook. So whether it be content, imagery, getting to know your client's story through asking questions in kind of a questionnaire format, or even sharing your scheduling link as a hyperlink inside of this file is going to do all of it. So I've created a welcome guide option here for us. So I know, again, when I was talking with Michelle, she was saying that the questionnaire is one of the files that she uses most frequently when she's initially getting to know her clients, because she wants to hear their story as well. So she uses a questionnaire file, but I thought I would take it a level higher and do a brochure where we can showcase a little bit more of some visuals. We can continue to tell our story in a really brand forward way. And then even get to know our clients. So just to walk you through this file type, you can break things down into pages here. So you can add sections. They're basically pages in the brochure file. You can customize all of this to be your brand colors. You can customize any of these fonts to fit your brand fonts and sizing. So you can get really customized here. A lot of branding is your story as well, right? So using this content to say what you'd like it to say, but also using this content to visually relate to your clients as they know you to be on social media. So green is clearly my brand color in this file. So we're going on to tell a little bit of our story, right? So I actually pulled this from Michelle's website. So that she's talking all about, who you are as an audience. Again, making it about your audience, right? Telling a little bit about who she is, and she's going to have your back. So her clients are immediately on board, right? A few fun facts to let them get to know you on a personal level a little bit more. And then to the point, hey, this is enough about me. Let me learn a little bit more about you, right? So really getting to know your client's story and who they are. I've only included 3 questions here. Everybody's got a different business process. You can have literally as many questions in here as you want. But even asking questions, I think there's an opportunity to kind of weave in your voice, weave in your story. I like to do a very tongue-in-cheek kind of copywriting when I'm writing. So I keep things light, describe to me in a few sentences this big idea of yours. Well, I want to start my own dog walking company is the little space holder that I've left when my clients go to fill this out. So, however you like to communicate with your audience, this is a great place to do that. And then this is where I've decided to include the scheduling link. So that should be enough to get us started. Can't wait to hear more about your story, really highlighting that, making it about them again. And then just saying, hey, feel free to choose a time that works. Again, I'm keeping things light. I'm keeping things really relatable. Everybody, again, your brand voice, your brand story, these things are all woven together, right? So the more you can weave that into your communication with your clients, whether it even just be through a HoneyBook file, as simple as this, I think some people, by the time they start introducing HoneyBook into their process, they can start to lose some of that brand voice and that brand story because you're just thinking that it's, how much can you even do with an invoice file, or how much can you even do with a questionnaire, but this is really an opportunity, like we've been talking about, to continue to share your story and use your brand voice as much as you can, even through imagery. I know we've been giving examples of photographers. This is huge file type for my photographer clients. This is a way to visually tell your story. We're giving the example of the bride, and imagine if your wedding day, blah, blah, blah. Straight up just show her what it could look like, right? Like the visuals here, this is another component of bringing people from social into a file type like this, where they're used to having a visual interaction with you. Continue telling the story through visuals with a brochure file is a great way to do that. So, again, part of your story, I think, is setting some expectations with your clients too. So in this file, I've done a little intro. I've gotten to know them a little bit by asking some questions and wanting to know their story. And now I'm setting some ground rules. I'm setting some expectations. Here are some things that I need from you. And again, keeping things really light. I know this idea has been your baby. Odds are you're here because you're a little stuck and you need some help. Let's have full disclosure between us. Don't leave out any of the juicy details, things like this. Just, again, thinking about your brand voice, thinking about your brand story here. Ask questions, get curious. These are things I need from you, but what you can expect from me. Here's, again, pushing that value of your story, telling them, relating back to your audience, letting them know what they're going to be getting from you. This is essentially a sales document, right? So you're introducing yourself, getting to know some things about them, setting some expectations. So what's the last step here? Next steps. How do they get started with you? They're going to schedule a call. If they didn't get a chance to do it above, maybe include your scheduling link again. Then they're going to be signing a contract with you, and then they're going to pay as you go. Straight up, you can put some pricing in here. You can wait to give pricing until you're actually on the consult call with them. There are a lot of different ways to do this. So this is just one example, obviously, of what you could do with some kind of welcome packet, introductory packet. The brochure can also showcase pricing options. So a lot of people will use the brochure file to break down different package options that they have for their clients, so that clients can actually go in and select what package they'd like to move forward with, or what's the best fit for them. So if we wanted to add something like that, I just go to click a plus button, and we can see all the different content blocks we can add. So we can add content, which is a combination of imagery and text. We can do questions, which we already highlighted. And then if you wanted to go ahead and add some services in here, it'll just pull in your packages from your master templates. So you want to make sure that all of your, if you want to include scheduling, make sure your scheduling is set up first. And if you want to include pricing, make sure that all your package templates are built out. And then you can easily just pull in. So let's say you're going to do a corporate coaching package. You can go ahead and pull this in to let your clients select from here or something like that. So lots and lots of different options for communicating with your clients through the brochure file. This is a great, great introductory file once you get your clients into the HoneyBook system, either through that contact form or through the direct link on your social media. And then basically just make sure that any pricing or scheduling is set up, and then you can go into building something like this for your brand and your business as well. And again, the services are even an opportunity for you to continue to have your brand voice and your brand story involved in what they're going to be receiving from you, just describing your services. So I know the chat is popping off, so hopefully people are excited about this. I know I am. We literally have multiple webinars on the brochure file specifically just because it is so diverse and it can do so many different things and so multidimensional. You guys definitely spend some time hanging out in here and play around with it. It is a really, really fun file type. I had a client once describe it as like virtual scrapbooking, and I love that descriptor. She was clearly a storyteller. So that is really what I wanted to show you guys. I think we're going to open it up for questions. I think we've got about 15 minutes left here. So I think that should be a perfect amount of time to kind of go through. If you guys have questions specifically for Michelle, just go ahead and chat those in. And like I said, when you go to type in a question and you add the question mark to the text, it'll prompt you to submit the question actually as a question, and that'll really help us go through them more quickly. So if you wouldn't mind doing that for me, that would be a huge help. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I can always start sharing it again in case we need to go through some HoneyBook stuff. If you have HoneyBook questions, throw those in as well. But we are open it up to the crowd. So let's see here. Michelle, I know there were some questions that actually came in before we even went live today. I don't know if you had a chance to check those out.
I was kind of looking at them. Yeah, I think we covered some of them, but I'm happy to just like go through them and just like touch back on those if that would be beneficial to everyone.
Yeah, totally. There was a specific question about storytelling on LinkedIn. So I think just to kind of maybe adopt that question a little bit, we've talked a lot about Instagram storytelling and video storytelling. Do you think that there's like a different cadence or tone or something that should be used on LinkedIn, or do you think there's the same value there?
I think it goes the same way. It's just about knowing your audience. So it really doesn't matter what platform you're on. I mean, we could throw Pinterest in there, although I don't really consider Pinterest social media because it's more of an SEO tool. But you know what I mean? Like video and YouTube, it really doesn't matter. It always comes back to your audience. So much of storytelling is about branding. You know, that's really, you need to understand who you are. You need to understand who your audience is and your voice. That will help you choose your platform. If you know your audience is on LinkedIn and you know the voice that you want to use, carry that over in your storytelling. I think people also have, LinkedIn has been around for a really long time and we're all used to using it like for our corporate jobs and, their, networking and those type of things. But LinkedIn is really pushing the envelope on trying to be more personal, adding videos, adding things like stories, different things like that. So don't limit yourself in sharing stories on LinkedIn because of a kind of a view you have on that platform. It always just comes back to your audience. What do they need to hear? How can you show up? How can you share that in a way that's valuable?
Awesome. Okay. There was another question about storytelling in regulated industries. And the example was about like the healthcare industry. So I imagine it's kind of like a HIPAA compliance thing where maybe you can't necessarily share too many client stories, obviously. So how do you kind of mitigate that, or how do you navigate that storytelling in that kind of industry?
Yeah, totally. So I'm not all up to date with HIPAA, so forgive me with that. But I think it's very similar too with like testimonials and things in the coaching industry. Like if you're not already doing this, asking for feedback and review and things like that, and using that without names, that can be really valuable. Maybe asking more specific questions about an experience or something that someone has, asking questions so you can create a story from that rather than sharing like, here's 2 sentences about what happened with a name. You can kind of say someone who recently, came to us, experienced X, Y, and Z. So you can definitely ask some questions that will help you form those stories that will make sure you're not breaking any laws.
Yeah. Awesome. There is another question specific to the kind of bride example that we were talking about. Someone is saying that they really struggle to actually get their clients, specifically for this person, it's their brides, on the phone. So is there any tips that you can give when you're kind of, again, getting those missing links between social media to getting the inquiry to actually getting someone to meet with you and have that conversation? Like, what tips do you have around that?
Yeah. So first off, get HoneyBook. Because I work with so many photographers and they all are using HoneyBook because it's just a great visual way to tell stories, to onboard new clients. Maybe it's kind of nerve-wracking for them to book a call right away and they want to rather tell you a little bit more or answer a questionnaire or learn a little bit more of you. There might be a disconnect that's happening. If you're just pushing everybody straight to a call and it's not happening, then figure out how you can build and nurture that relationship in between. And again, the brochure that you shared, all those different things, asking questions, the contact form, that's a great way to do that. And I also like to invite people on social media to have a conversation with me and to message me rather than just blasting links everywhere, especially when I'm selling something or when I get on the phone. So that's another way to kind of work that into your strategy as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's see. We had a lot of questions come in through the question thing, which I love. Let's see. Any advice on changing a brand name without too many consequences and or keeping a name that doesn't reflect the new brand and language, but creating an image that overrides the name's first impressions?
Okay, all right. I think I get what you're saying. I think Jenny, right? I think I get what you're saying here. Okay, so the first thing that I would want to know if we were working together was just like, how established is the business today? Because I think sometimes we put a lot of emphasis on like changing a color, or changing a font, or changing a logo, and it's like, is it really that big of a deal? So that's the first thing that I want to check in on. And then we're not talking about SEO today, but that's something to consider. If you're ranking for that, you might not want to shift your name. You might want to rather just shift your messaging around that name. But again, if it's something that's like not going to upheaval your whole entire business, it could be just a simple shift and say that we're now working under this brand name. And actually, my business is a great example because I started my business with my husband doing branding and graphic design, but we didn't have any clients. It was just the idea. And we called it Brandmerry. And then I shifted to do coaching. And I was like, do I keep my name? Do I not? And so I really defined what Brandmerry meant to me and interwove it into the mission statement. And then I just continued to use that moving forward.
I love that. So maybe it's not as important to like change the name if you're feeling like it doesn't really describe the brand anymore, but maybe just change the story of the name that you already have.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, cool. And I just really quickly wanted to point out that Sarah mentioned that she has, this is kind of in relation to the question of getting people on the phone and kind of struggling with that. Sarah says that in her contact form, she has her clients just select if they want more information or if they're actually ready for a call.
Ooh,
and then
yeah.
let her know how to move forward as a next step. So that's a good tip for that question. One other question that we had from Joy was, is there a best time of day to post and how often should you post? Is it really a daily thing that you should be doing?
Oh man. All right. I'm going to try and not put too much of my marketing hat on right now, but there's no specific time of day. It's going to vary based on your audience. So just like we've been talking about with storytelling, you guys, everything that you do in business isn't really about you. It's about your audience. So you want to find the times of days when your audience is most likely to engage or your audience is on social media. You can find that very easily in your analytics for those pieces. From a how often should you be posting standpoint, I actually take the approach of being not 100% running my business on social media. So having pieces in place that are more organic, SEO, using search engines like Pinterest, YouTube, those different things are really powerful because content lives longer on those platforms. And I don't have to live on social media. So you'll notice if you follow me, I post when I want to post. And I just make my post really, really great. So I go against the grain with what some people say about posting every day, posting 2 times a day. I'd rather just put my emphasis on creating really great content that resonates with my audience than just a bunch of content, right? Quality over quantity. So that's my permission slip to all of you to just like post when you're inspired, and then, look at your analytics to see when is the best time to optimize that.
Awesome. Jay kind of had a follow-up question to that, but also to what we were talking about earlier about not being afraid to retell, a similar story or the same story. He's wondering, when you're reposting it, are you rewording it at all, or are you just straight up copy and paste and everything's good to go?
Copy and paste, really, when you're starting out. I mean, the thing that I recommend on Instagram, because it's such a visual platform specifically, or, is change out the photo, right? Switch out the photo. Do that on any platform. That's creating a new piece of content. I'm one of those people who love to like watch other brands and see what they're doing. And I'm telling you, there are like prominent multi-million-dollar companies that every 30 days are reusing the content that's working, because they know they've gotten in front of a new audience. They've got new people to share this core content with. And your brand story is one of those pieces.
Awesome. I kind of have a follow-up question that you just made me think of. When you say that a post is working, what are you specifically, like, what are some key metrics that you might be looking at to know that the content is working for you, or to know that a story is worth retelling?
That's great. Okay. So I think, it used to be really just like hearts and likes, but that doesn't really help us overall with the algorithm. What we really want to look at are comments, like the engagement on the post. And then I love to look at my insights, like how many people visited my profile, how many people clicked through if I had a call to action. Those are the type of things that you really want to look for, because they're getting people to take action. It's really easy to like a photo, you guys. Like, let's be honest, we're just scrolling and mindlessly like hearting things. So anytime someone is DMing you, messaging you, maybe filling out a form on your website, I use HoneyBook to even ask, like, where did you hear about me? Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, so that I can start to figure out where people are coming from, as well as sharing content. That's a really, really great way. Shareable content is huge. Those are the things that you want to look for in your analytics and your insights.
Awesome. That's super helpful. Yeah. And on the topic of adding a lead source question to your contact form, you guys, there are a ton of reports actually in the tools and reporting section inside of HoneyBook on your lead sources, the success rate of where your leads are coming from. Like, are they actually booking with you? Like, are you getting a ton of leads for Instagram, but only 10% of them actually end up booking with you? So there's tons of stats on that. So once you just automate that process of learning where your leads are coming from by including that question in your contact form and putting the work on your clients to say, wait, where did you hear about me? So you're not having to dig into the analytics too much and the reports are just auto-populating. That's a really, really fabulous way to do that. One other question that we had from Gab that just came in, they're wondering, how do you choose when to use a regular post on Instagram versus an Instagram story versus now Reels versus IGTV? There's so much. What do we do?
So many options. Look, social media needs to be fun, you guys. It has to be fun. Otherwise, it's going to feel like a chore. Your content's it's just not going to be great. So I never live by like a hard, fast rule. But the thing that I would say is that when you integrate different things on the platform, Instagram specifically, like you're asking, Gab, that is, it's going to help you with the algorithm overall. So Insta stories, for instance, because they expire every 24 hours, it's nice to just try and show up daily on Insta stories. If you're like brand new to Insta stories and you can't do every day, that's cool too, right? Start with doing 3 times a week, pick a day on your schedule where maybe you show a behind the scenes of your business. If you're a wedding photographer and you've got a wedding coming up, show a behind the scenes, have somebody film you doing your job, like all types of different things. You can also share content on stories that isn't in real time. So one of the things we didn't talk about is I actually travel full time. So I live a very nomadic lifestyle. I don't share like my travel experiences in the moment. I will then just take a bunch of pictures and videos and then share them later on. So just showing up consistently in stories is really helpful. I like to be more strategic with my feed. Again, like I said, I'm not posting on my feed every day, maybe 3 times a week if I'm not promoting something, because I want that to be really quality content that's going to be shared out. And then I just think real reels are fun. Okay, so just like have fun with reels. They're getting a lot of traction right now. Anything that's new to a platform that you can kind of pick up on and just play and experiment, nobody knows what they're doing. So just have fun and show up again, and everything that you're creating, create content for your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. The reels definitely have a learning curve, even for a millennial like me. I've created a couple for HoneyBook, and I'm not kidding you guys. It probably took me 2 hours just to figure out how to post one. But once you get it, it definitely gets your creative juices flowing, and it's very fun. So I love that. And we're down to 1 minute. We are right on the money with this.
Cool.
So I think we can wrap it up. We actually got through literally all of the questions that came through the question and answer queue. So it was like perfect timing for everybody. I know we had some questions about the sharing of this and the recording of all of this and everything. So this was recorded. We will be emailing it out to you guys, and it'll also be on our YouTube channel. And we're going to be sharing it with Michelle for her to share on her platforms as well. So wherever you guys are coming from today, you'll have access to it. Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time to come and educate on us on all of this. I learned a ton. I know everybody else did. So thank you so much.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. I had so much fun. Thank you for having me. And you guys, seriously, like I said, I wouldn't be on this platform if I didn't vouch for HoneyBook and the work that they do. So if you haven't checked it out, check it out with what they, the offer that they have, because it's a great way to streamline your business.
Amazing. Thank you, Michelle.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, guys.